Well, good evening, good evening, good evening. My name is William Lawson, and this is the Fight Back Report. We appreciate you being here. Well, things aren't going kind of like we thought they would be at this point. It's funny. Earlier in the week, we talked about Mitch McConnell mentioning that they may not have the votes to stave off witnesses and subpoenas, but it seems to be the case where they actually had the votes. We're going to play the clip from our friends at Breitbart of the calling of the votes, because a lot of people want to know how their senator voted. And here's how you're going to find out. I'm going to actually play it for you so you can see it yourself. So you don't have to hear it and you don't have to read it. You can actually see it yourself and see how it went down. So at 51-49, or actually 49-51, the nays say there isn't any reason to call any more witnesses. There isn't any reason to ask for any subpoenas. And frankly, and no matter how much caterwauling that Democrats do, especially Chucky Schumer, about that this is a travesty and now the Senate is complicit in covering up for Donald Trump. The fact of the matter is, the House, it's their deal. That's what they were supposed to do. So even if you are on the left, even if you're a Democrat, what you should be looking at is how much Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler of the Nadler Follies screwed this up. They were trying so hard to get this done early. They in their brain, I guess they thought it was going to be a slam dunk. So I think a lot of people who aren't fans of the president just sort of believe that nobody else is either, and that it'll be easy. I can't imagine what they were thinking. If you're not really going to have a real proceeding that actually involved crime, and this was a mistake. What they knew was that there was no crime. There were things that may have been inappropriate, I guess, and some Republicans actually said that. As a matter of fact, even one of the president's lawyers, Alan Dershowitz, might have said that some of the acts might have been inappropriate. Maybe. But inappropriate does not rise to the level of an impeachable offense. You gotta have a crime. Not just something that you don't like. Not just something that is ouchy. Not just something that is cringy. That's not enough. And the Democrats didn't have enough. They just didn't have enough. And again, you may not like the president. You may think he's a racist. You may think he's a misogynist. You may think he's a butthole. You may think whatever you want. And I'm not telling you not to. I'm not telling you to vote for the guy. I'm not telling you to support him. I'm not telling you to wave the MAGA flag or get a hat. I'm not telling you to do any of that stuff. I'm not. But if we're going to be grown-ups, then we have to understand this. In this particular instance, the House did it wrong. They swung the bat and they missed. Now, my thoughts on what goes on after the president gets acquitted, I'll tell you after we play the clip from Breitbart and how the vote went down. This is the U.S. Senate. This is the Honorable John Roberts presiding, and you'll see how the vote went down.
The question is, shall it be in order to consider and debate under the impeachment rules any motion to subpoena witnesses or documents? The yeas and nays are required under Senate Resolution 483. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander?
No.
No. Ms. Baldwin? Aye. Mr. Barrasso?
No.
No. Mr. Bennett? Aye. Mrs. Blackburn? No. Mr. Blumenthal? Mr. Blunt? No. Mr. Booker?
Yes.
Aye. Mr. Bozeman? No. Mr. Braun?
No.
No. Mr. Brown? Aye. Mr. Burr? No. Ms. Cantwell? Aye. Mrs. Capito? No. Mr. Cardin? Aye. Mr. Carper? Aye. Mr. Casey? Aye. Mr. Cassidy? No. Ms. Collins? Aye. Mr. Coons? Aye. Mr. Cornyn? No. Ms. Cortez Masto? Aye. Mr. Cotton? No. Mr. Kramer? No. Mr. Crapo? No. Mr. Cruz? No. Mr. Daines? No. Ms. Duckworth? Aye. Mr. Durbin? Aye. Mr. Enzi? No. Ms. Ernst? Mrs. Feinstein? Aye. Ms. Ernst, no. Mrs. Fisher? No. Mr. Gardner? No. Mrs. Gillibrand? Aye. Mr. Graham? No. Mr. Grassley? No. Ms. Harris? Aye. Ms. Hassan? Aye. Mr. Hawley? No. Mr. Heinrich? Aye. Ms. Hirono? Aye. Mr. Hoven? No. Mrs. Hyde-Smith? No. Mr. Inhofe? No. Mr. Johnson? No. Mr. Jones? Aye. Mr. Kane? Aye. Mr. Kennedy? No. Mr. King? Aye. Ms. Klobuchar? Aye. Mr. Langford? No. Mr. Leahy? Aye. Mr. Lee? No. Mrs. Loeffler? No. Mr. Manchin? Aye. Mr. Markey? Aye. Mr. McConnell? No. Ms. McSally? No. Mr. Menendez? Aye. Mr. Merkley? Aye. Mr. Moran? No. Ms. Murkowski? No. Mr. Murphy? Aye. Mrs. Murray? Aye. Mr. Paul? No. Mr. Perdue? No. Mr. Peters? Aye. Mr. Portman? No. Mr. Reed? Aye. Mr. Risch? No. Mr. Roberts? No. Mr. Romney? Aye. Ms. Rosen? Aye. Mr. Rounds? No. Mr. Rubio? No. Mr. Sanders? Aye. Mr. Sass? No. Mr. Schatz? Aye. Mr. Schumer? Aye. Mr. Scott of Florida? No. Mr. Scott of South Carolina? No. Mrs. Shaheen? Aye. Mr. Shelby? No. Ms. Sinema? Aye. Ms. Smith? Aye. Ms. Stabenow? Aye. Mr. Sullivan? No. Mr. Tester? Aye. Mr. Thune? No. Mr. Tillis? No. Mr. Toomey? No. Mr. Udall? Aye. Mr. Van Hollen? Aye. Mr. Warner? Aye. Ms. Warren? Aye. Mr. Whitehouse? Aye. Mr. Wicker? No. Mr. Wyden? Aye. Mr. Young? No. Mr. Blumenthal? Aye.
Are there any senators in the chamber wishing to change his or her vote? If not, the yeas are 49. The nays are 51. The motion is not agreed to.
The motion is not agreed to. That means that there will not be any witnesses or anything subpoenaed. And basically, for the same reason that I told you earlier before you watched the vote, and you watched yourself. Two Republicans went against the rest of the Republicans. And they were two of the usual suspects, Susan Collins and Mitt Romney. Not unexpected. It's interesting that we hear Democrats, sometimes saber rattling about, well, there are some conservative Democrats or from conservative states that may flip over and vote with Republicans. That almost never happens. That almost never happens. Democrats vote with Democrats all the time. And this idea of independence, I love how people go, well, I'm an independent. The independents in the Senate caucus and vote like Democrats all the time. They just do. Bernie Sanders is an independent. And they vote with the Democrats all the time. Now, what's the next step? What happens next? What happens next is this. They are right now in the Senate is in recess. It is 10:40 on the 31st of January, 2020. The Senate is in recess, and they're coming up with a way forward to basically end this thing. They are going to end it. That's all there is. I mean, that's all there is to it. They are going to end it. They have to bring this thing in for a landing. That's all. They have to bring it in, so it is some sort of controlled dissent. Now, if there's a problem that Republicans have, and it's only a couple of Republicans, and it's almost, frankly, I don't know, almost not worth dealing with, in my opinion. But in order to maintain, if Republicans didn't have a majority in the Senate, this would have turned out completely differently. So somehow we got to maintain a majority if you're going to have things work out like you want them to work out. So there's got to be a soft landing for some of the Republican senators who are in purple districts, and that's what they're looking for going forward. The conclusion isn't going to change. The conclusion isn't going to change. The president will be acquitted. He will walk around and he'll be pissing a bunch of people off, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's going to happen. He's going to walk into the State of the Union address on Tuesday like, "Hail to me, you suck and you suck." I mean, that's just as distasteful as it might be. That's what's going to happen. just kind of preparing you for it. Maybe you'll watch State of the Union. Maybe you won't. Chances are, obviously, I'm working, so I probably won't see much of it. If I see any of it, it'll be in replay on YouTube or whatever. But that's how that's going to work out. The president is going to be acquitted. He's not going to be removed from office. And moving forward, I can wait. Wait, it's coming in. Wait. Yes. In October, third week in October, another bombshell will show up concerning something. Whether it'll be the Ukraine, whether it'll be Russian interference, whether it'll be I don't know what, but some bombshell will show up third week of October to derail the president's re-election campaign. You put money on it. Put money on it. And why is this? And if you have the mind, it's because there are people who really love and care about this country, and they don't want to see it ruined and sent down a trail that it may never come back from because of Donald Trump. I'm guessing that's not it. What I'm guessing is at this point, there's no one in the stable on the Democrat side that can beat Trump at this point. The mistake, my opinion, the mistake that Democrats made in talking about, come on, Democrats have been talking about impeaching Trump since before the inauguration in 2017. You remember. We've been talking about the emollients clause, They've been talking about impeachment of Donald Trump since jump, right? And now there's no. They pick two things that aren't crimes. They pick two things that aren't crimes. Abuse of power. What? Well, it's opinion and obstruction of Congress, which is not even a thing. There's no crime in either of those articles of impeachment, which is why he was never going to be, especially with the Republican-controlled Senate, he was never going to be convicted. He was never going to be removed from office. And they knew this, and I believe that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and all the Democrats, Adam Schiff of the Schiff Show, and Jerry Nadler of the Nadler Follies, they all knew it was never going to happen. This was all to damage Trump in some way and chip off some of his supporters or make it hard to support him. Because frankly, absolutely, I said this before on this program, sometimes the dude's hard to support. Sometimes when he could just not talk. That would be better than talking. Sometimes when he could just not tweet, it'd be better, easier, right? But you knew what you got before. So none of us are surprised. So that's what you're going to see. You're going to see the October surprise in an attempt to damage Trump, because whoever wins the nomination on the Democrat side cannot beat Trump. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter if it's Bernie Sanders. It doesn't matter if it's Elizabeth Warren. It doesn't matter if it's Klobuchar. It doesn't matter who it is. None of them can beat Trump one-on-one. Not one of them. Not even if Hillary Clinton shows up at the last minute and goes, "I'll do it." Shows up like drunk auntie. It's just not. Hillary Clinton. Hillary Karen Clinton. You couldn't beat Barack Obama. You couldn't beat Trump the first time, and you won't be able to beat Trump again. Yes, I know you won the popular vote, but this game's not played like that. And I don't think you win the popular vote this time at all. I just don't think so. So Hillary Clinton is not the choice. Drafting Hillary Clinton into that convention is a bad is a bad move. It's a lose move. Democrat Party doesn't really care much for Bernie Sanders. Looks like Joe Biden. Joe Biden can't beat Trump. Oh, you're asking me who's going to win the nomination? I don't have any earthly idea. I just couldn't. I couldn't tell you. It could be any of the people that I mentioned, or it could be somebody else. It doesn't matter. None of them can beat Trump. But they're going to do their best to damage him in some way between now and then. I don't think it's going to work. You know, I was talking to somebody the other day. Listen, here's the deal. Chill out. You will live through it. When Barack Obama was elected in 2008, I heard Republicans talk about it was going to be the end of life in this country as we knew it. Yes, we ended up with the Affordable Care Act, which I think is, especially with the individual mandate, that onerous piece of legislation, really set us back. But none of us died. We're okay. You know, there was all these things about if Donald Trump gets elected, the stock market's going to crash. Just the opposite. He's going to start World War III, especially with South Korea. Have you even heard about South Korea lately? At all? No. You're going to be okay. When Donald Trump gets elected next time, I really do think he will. You're going to be okay. You are going to be fine. Anyway, you saw the vote. You saw how it went down. The next time I show you a vote, it'll probably be a vote to acquit. So stay tuned for that. Till we see you again, go out there and learn something, love somebody. And for goodness sakes, y'all take care of yourself. This is Fight Back 2020. My name is Willie Lawson. We'll see you when we see you. Bye-bye now.